This is Ginger with the Overdrive Show.
Hi, this is Beth Nimmo.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late. My other interview went over just a little bit.
I completely understand that, and I've been very guilty of that in the past. So I'm from Texas, so I'm a talker, so it just happens.
Okay.
Well, first of all, so nice to meet you by phone. And words can't remotely convey my deepest sorrow for your loss. I've watched the movie twice, and I have an 18-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old daughter, and I have a 22-year-old son. So for me, it hits home really hard. In fact, my 18-year-old reminds me of Rachel. Like,
Oh.
so to watch that happen and to even conceive any of that with my own children, I can't even. I won't even pretend like I can understand your loss. It's I'm very, very sorry. First off, and I want you to know that every question I ask, I'm trying to be as sensitive to the situation as possible, because I respect what you've been through, and I don't want to say anything that would in any way, not only maybe offend or hurt you, or to even hurt Rachel's memory to talk about it or anything like that. So you feel free. This is recorded, so I can edit out anything. So you can tell me I'd rather not that be in the interview, or I'd rather not answer that question. I can just take it out. So I'm definitely, it's a daunting task for me, because normally I'm interviewing people about music or maybe a film about cross country running, or it's not always such a very, very serious subject, and so it's a little bit, makes me a little bit, feels like a very big responsibility. I'll just say that. So know that I'm trying to do it with most delicate of, hands with this interview. So.
Oh, that's fine. You feel free to ask, and I'll let you know if something's a little sensitive.
Okay, awesome. Well,
yeah.
I have a very big connection to this entire story. My sister lived in Colorado at the time. She has most of her adult life, and my nieces and nephews were going to school there in Littleton, but they were younger. Like, the oldest was maybe 12 or 13, so they weren't in high school yet, and they weren't in Columbine. But when the news came out, like, I literally was in Michigan here, and I heard Littleton shooting school, and then I went into this immediate panic. And so, and then through that, I do know one of the victims' parents. And so there's that connection too. And this is a very personal story to me. So I pretty much cried through the entire film. But it's very, very well done. So I'm curious, like, so what led you, like, or inspired you to make this movie?
Well, we've been telling Rachel's story for the last 17 years, and we use her own writings and drawings, of course, to do that. And the impact is always the same. We get tremendous impact about people that are encouraged and empowered, and life-changing stories for people after hearing Rachel's story. And so I felt God actually told me quite a few years ago that I was supposed to do a movie. And it just came about a little differently than I'd expected it to, but I'm good with it. It's a good movie. And so I got the team together. Well, I partnered with Benny Prophet.
Uh-huh.
He has the same shared vision that I have, and so it just worked out that we were a team. And I've worked with him for a number of years, and we both knew that this story was left for God's purposes, a bigger picture than what we could imagine. And so he helped put this team together, and they worked with me very closely, especially my director, Brian Ball. He was amazing, and he worked very closely with me and asked me about everything he could think of to really be authentic in how we did the story. And I'm very pleased with how it's come together.
Yes, it's a big responsibility to balance. You have to take some creative liberties because you don't know identical conversations and what people
Right.
said, but it's also in a story like this where it's not only a Christian film, but it's a true story about a very, you know, just devastating event. And so you like getting personal accounts or facts, you know, the important ones, that, you know, the important aspects of it, getting them as correct as you possibly can has got to be a big responsibility, right?
It was. This is a historical story. You know, it's I mean, this impacted our whole country. It was important to get certain things right, and even the research that was done about the two shooters of Columbine. My team did their due diligence there, and they used stuff right out of their journals as well. They did a lot of research before anything was actually put into script. They followed as closely, even the video that the boys produced. They
Right.
followed that as closely as they could. So we tried, you know, we're trying to be honest in telling the story with Rachel, and also for the facts of that day. We're trying to be very honest about it.
I'm curious how accurate was the portrayal of Rachel, this wonderful new actress. She was infectious. I mean, her personality, she was beautiful, and of course, your daughter was very beautiful. I didn't know her, but you know, just you know, you can tell by her face what a sweet spirit she must have had. Was that very accurate? Did you like work on like kind of even her mannerisms and things like that?
You know what? She was just the most perfect fit. She was new at acting, so she worked really hard. She studied Rachel's writings and really got inside her skin, inside her head. But a lot of her demeanor, her looks, and her mannerisms, and her love for the Lord were already established. She was just amazing, and I love how she portrayed Rachel. She's very real about it, and Rachel had a cute little sassy, spunky side of her, and that came through. She had the deep faith that came through. Her love for people that came through. So Macy couldn't have done it any better. I'm so proud of this little girl. She's my new little Rachel.
She isn't. It really is infectious to watch her personality, and
Yeah.
so I mean, this is a question out of just curiosity. Like, you know, since it's been 17 years, some of those who were either surviving victims or people who were there but weren't injured, like, you know, they're early 30s now. So, like, for them, it's like, it's been a while, you know, and I'm wondering,
Yeah.
like, what made 2016 or 17 years later, like, are you just now kind of feeling like you're up to it, or was there a certain reason that now came, you know, this timing as far as when you came out with the movie?
I think it's really more about God's timing.
Okay.
Efforts have been made to do movies prior to this, and it just didn't come together. And this time, maybe it's because Macy was there. I mean, there's so many elements now that tie together that make this movie work the way it does.
Right.
And I think God just held us off until the right perfect timing. And I'd have to, you know, I think there was man-made effort.
Yeah.
It tried to get the ball rolling earlier, and it just didn't happen. So I have to say, I think God knew when this story needed to come out, and He knew who needed to be involved in it. And this time, when I was approached again by Benny Prophet, because we had tried to do it before, I knew it was right. It was right time, and I'm like, okay, let's move forward. And he worked so hard on my behalf. So yes, it's all coming together.
So with this film, I mean, I personally got several different things from it, and even for my daughter. But like, what are your hopes for this film? Like, your hope in making this? What do you hope happens from this film?
Well, I'm hoping to impact a whole generation of kids for the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's my ultimate goal, is to see a lot of Rachels raised up. And I think there are a lot of them are out there, but they're silent.
Yeah.
But they want to have a voice, and I'm hoping this will empower them to stand strong for their faith and their convictions and what they believe. And I'm also praying that we have a whole new harvest of young people that really understand that there is something worth living life for, and there is a cause that they can champion. It's bigger than them, and they can find life. They can find truth, in a world that gives them a lot of double talk and double standard. There's something that's real, and that it's the Lord. And so we're hoping actually to have a whole movement. It's not just about an entertaining movie. It's about to jumpstart a movement of young people. Rachel called herself a warrior. I would love to have a whole army of warriors for Christ.
You know what? And I think the kind of the dynamic thing about the film is it touches on almost everything that my kids or like my kids' friends have experienced. As believers, the kids have at one point or another questioned their faith. They've become a little lost at times, is God really there? And, deciding for themselves whether or not, they believe what they believe, they all go through that. And then, the bullying, the suicide, the cliques, the partying, it just seemed to hit on almost everything you can think of what that young people go through. And I like that it didn't picture her as just this perfect little angel. It shows that she's you know what I mean? I mean, because most films, it kind of gets to be all about that, and people can't relate to that when they're that age. They can relate to, oh yeah, I shouldn't have been doing that. She did it too, though. But look what happened. She turned her life around, and I think that it was important that you didn't, focus only on all the perfect things she did. You told it very authentically. I think that's important.
Well, I had to fight for that because in her writings, if you read her writings in the two books of Rachel's Tears and the Journals of Rachel Scott, she talks about how she was asking God to help her not to smoke, not to drink, not to cave in to a boyfriend. She was very real in her letters to the Lord. And I did not want a sanitized Christian film because I think we totally miss it. I think people, because they can't connect to it and they can't relate to it because they understand what failure and falling short looks like and feels like, you can't connect to somebody who's getting it right all the time. So it was very important to me that I showed this struggle of trying to live your life out in a real way. And she got some things wrong, but I think she got more right than she got wrong. But I needed to show how hard it is for a kid. It is hard. We need to have compassion and understanding for that our children aren't perfect and they're not going to get it right all the time. I think the thing that is so encouraging about Rachel is she just kept going back and kept trying.
Yeah.
She'd fall, but she'd get back up and she'd try again, and she'd pray and ask God to help her again. And that, I think, is where kids need to understand. Messing up is not going to ruin your relationship with the Lord. God gets it. He understands it.
Yeah.
You can be mad and angry even at him, and he's okay. He's okay. All he wants is for us to just keep turning back to him, keep asking, keep trying to do the right thing. He's fine with our failures because he honestly, unless the Lord does it through us, we can't do it anyway.
And I think it makes the Savior more accessible, for young people. Yeah. It just makes it to where there's not this box you have to fit in. And I love the story with her big brother. That was probably my most tearful moment, was with him. Just watching her compassion for him, but also the way that he ended up kind of witnessing back to her, that,
Yeah.
that happens in our life. We lead people to the Lord, and then they call us out on our stuff, and it's very hard. It's a great, that's the best friend. I mean, it's the best friend to have. It's somebody who will reflect that back to you instead of, and in a non-judgmental way, the way that he did. So is the story, out of curiosity for myself, one part that hit me was her contemplating suicide, but then seeing his dog tags. Is that part factual?
Well, she did talk about suicide. However, that is a created story with the dog tags. She had dog tags that she wore all the time.
Okay.
So that's a creative
liberty
part of the story. But
she struggled with it.
She thought about suicide, and in all the speaking I've done with kids and stuff, that is a very strong pull. Kids think about death all the time now, and they see it everywhere they go in the media and entertainment. Death is there, and kids' suicide is still a major concern for high schoolers, especially. So she thought about that too. She writes about it. But then, of course, she chooses to live.
Right.
So, yes, that was a creative liberty, but I wanted the suicide to be addressed because, once again, that's where kids are.
Yeah. There's such a lack of hope right now.
Yes.
It's just that it's more and more, and with technology, the bullying is so much more bolder than even Rachel faced, because they can bully you like a coward. They can do it behind the scenes and do it from a Twitter account or an Instagram or a Snapchat. They can bully you even after death. They have people who have committed suicide and they're still bullying them. Glad you're dead, glad you did it. Like they're being bullied after they've already taken their life, and it's a subject that I don't think the church likes to talk about very much, and I think that's important that you included that. And it seems that, it touched even on poverty with her big brother, struggling in that way. I mean, that's real, that's
real. And that was a true part of the story. Mark was a homeless kid, and his mom and dad didn't marry, and his mother was a crack addict. So,
did that terrify you to know that Rachel was walking in that area? Like, that was my reaction, is like, yep, I can see both of my daughters doing that, and even knowing I'm in their mind, their mom's like having a heart attack. But
yeah. I found out so many things after her death that she did that would have mortified me had I known.
Yeah.
I would have been worrying all the time for her.
But God was
watching
that.
God gave her grace to do things, and He protected her, because I think she was really walking in the Spirit to do those things, and so God had her back. Because normally you would never want a teenage girl to cross those lines,
Just young, beautiful, like target, definitely. I think that was incredible. Do you stay in touch with any of the other victims' families? Are they in touch at all? Do you guys ever, speak to each other at all?
No, we did for a few years. Everybody kind of went their own way. So the last few years, there's been no initial contact of any kind.
I guess one of my hardest questions to ask you, and you don't have to answer it, but at what point did you have to face forgiving Eric and Dylan?
Well, I actually faced that early.
Yeah.
I had to face that early.
I would think that would be one of the hardest components of this. That as a mom, that's my thought. That's got to be.
Well, it is hard, but as a believer, the Word tells us to do it. And then, as a representative of who Rachel was, she would want that. And then the other reason, Ginger, I think it's so important to walk in forgiveness is, for Rachel, that day was a life sentence. for it not to be my life sentence, I have to let go of that pain and that anger and all of that hurt and trauma. And I have to ask the Lord to heal my heart. And that key actually is given to us through the act of forgiveness. We get more healing physically in our bodies through forgiving somebody. And it's a proven scientific fact now that forgiveness will bring healing. And it's emotional healing, spiritual healing, and a lot of times physical healing. And I didn't want April the 20th, 99 to be a life sentence for me. So it's one of those things where you go back again and again. It's not a one-time thing. But every time you feel that anger, that pain, you go back and ask and give it back to the Lord and say, I need you to help me walk in forgiveness on this and let this go. And God's been faithful to do that. I have my moments where I can get all stirred up, you know.
Yeah.
But I know now what I need to do when something triggers anger in me. I know my first response needs to be, Lord, I ask you to help me to let that go and walk in forgiveness with that.
Yeah, my friend who had a child that was a victim in the shooting, one of the things I asked them was where did you start, with your forgiveness? Like, how did you get there? And they said, because we realized how troubled these kids were. That's where they connected their forgiveness, was realizing how troubled these two young boys were. And that helped them. The compassion for that aspect is what helped their forgiveness aspect. Have you had any, I know this is like a daunting task to take on as a movie. Have you had anyone, like other victims or families or anybody, have any, have you had anybody push back in a negative way in any capacity? Or
I have. Yeah. I have. Columbine is still extremely
very sensitive
about
yeah.
things. And I think there was a great misunderstanding that I was going to go into the violence of that day, and I chose not to do that. So I think once people understand, I'm really just telling Rachel's story. I'm not telling a Columbine story.
Yeah.
I think there'll be a little latitude given there, but no, sensitivity still is rides very high here, and people are still very protective, I guess.
Yeah.
Of how anybody would
portray that day.
Story. Yeah.
Yeah, and
so I get that. I get it, and I don't fault them for that. I understand those feelings.
Because everybody's going to process this differently, and
right.
your true heart to even do this movie is for Rachel's life to encourage and inspire people. I'm thinking there's a lot of kids that will be very moved by this film. Is there like a website, or is there somewhere they can either share stories or like encourage other people through her, her life story? Do you have anything like that?
Well, we've got 2 books. We've got Rachel's Tears and the Journals of Rachel Scott. You can get those anywhere on e-readers, Amazon. Those are available pretty much anywhere. And then there's so much information on the web about this story. You can pretty much pull up anything for research or for information purposes, on the internet. Everything's pretty much out there. So they can find that. There is a movement called I Am Hope that's being promoted through the movie that is especially just for kids, and it's from First Priority of America.
Uh-huh.
And they can go there. They can look up the I Am Hope movement, which also will connect kids.
It gives them resources.
A resource.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, give them resources.
That's incredible.
So we do have follow-up information and follow-up resources that we're trying to make available, because this movie does trigger a lot of emotions in people's hearts.
Absolutely. And having a friend that had their child be a victim, it was I didn't even know where to start talking with them, because I felt like there's nothing I can say that can possibly convey my heart, So those that have survived, that person, they are still, that day is like a reel, it's a loop in their head sometimes where, they're still trying to get past it in their early 30s, where they should be just, early family life and all that. And they have basically like PTSD, like a war hero. And, it's, it's been very hard to talk to them about, their child being past it, because, every time for them, I think, every time a movie or a news story leaks about it, they don't want to look at it. They don't want to be reminded. They're still trying to work past it. But when there's a film like this of hope, and I told them, I said, well, they haven't seen the movie yet, obviously, but I said 95% of this is Rachel. It's like the very last is obviously the shooting, but I said, it's 95% of it is just Rachel. It's just getting to know who she was. She wasn't a statistic. She wasn't just a number that day. This was a life. And I think when you show the value of one life, you show the value of all those lives, and I include Dylan and Eric in that, because they were very, very lost. I loved her quirky, personality, kind of, her whole life seemingly, I know she had that time period where she struggled with, being as outward with her faith as she wanted to be, but at the same time, she wasn't afraid to be silly and, wear silly hats and, like the whole personality portrayed was she really wasn't ashamed of anything, not just her faith, but she wasn't ashamed to be Rachel. And but I know she struggled at times, but she really had this kind of fearlessness about her, and I think kids look at a girl that looks like Rachel and thinks, well, she didn't have anything wrong with her. What's so big about that story? And if it can happen to someone like that you would never imagine struggled with any of these things, that ever partied, that ever, that ever was ashamed of her faith or was afraid to say anything about it at times, kids just, there's so much pressure on them. It's just, not only the world, but their families, their parents, their, whoever, even grandparents or whatever. Everybody puts pressure on them. Who are you going to be? What are you going to do? And, hearing her talking about her future, not being able to see, college, getting married, any of that stuff, that happens to almost almost 3 of my kids at some point. They just, there's so much pressure of what are you going to do with your life? And, she did in 17 years what some people don't do in 70, I lost my niece at 22, and I say, well, she wasn't supposed to live to be past 10. She had cystic fibrosis. And I said, in 22 years, I don't know if I'll ever accomplish what she did, because as sick as she was, she fought every step of the way. When she couldn't play baseball because she couldn't run, the league agreed to let someone run for her. She could bat, and then someone would run the bases. She didn't let anything stop her. She found the very possible limits of her, disease, and she pushed. She lived to be 22, and even when she was ready to go home because she was very, very sick when she died. But she hit so many people. She was homecoming queen and FFA sweetheart and all this stuff. And, at 22, she had already hit all these people's lives. And kind of like you, we didn't even know how many people she touched until afterwards and said, you're Haley's aunt? Well, Haley this, Haley did this, Haley said that. And we're like, oh, we didn't even know she knew her, it's I think that unfolding has got to be a bittersweet process, but very beautiful to find out how amazing. Was that scene with the dresser? Did you not know that she had written her hand on the back of her dresser until
Did not know that at all. No, that was quite a surprise.
That had to be a very beautiful moment. Of course, my kids wrote on stuff too, and they would have hit it, but it was probably like a rainbow or a unicorn or something. But drawing her hand and it being so relevant to her story that she's still reaching out, I think it's incredible. And I commend you because I don't know how you do it. I know, well, I do know. I know God is your strength, but you're still human. And to continue to kind of relive this when you not only are part of the movie, but, speaking to other people and it's not even come out yet. So you're obviously going to get even more feedback. And I commend you for that. I can't imagine how kind of hard and amazing at the same time that has to be.
Well, it's like you said, God gives grace, and it's like God given me this assignment, like the keeper of the flame.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to protect the story, honor the story, and give God the glory. So we're just trying to be faithful in that.
Well done. The film was, if the film was fictional, I think it would still touch people. I think it was so incredibly made. I think it not only were the people very good in the movie, just the things you touched on and the way it was told, even if it wasn't true, it would still, I think, affect a lot of kids, and kids and parents alike. And I'm so honored that you did the interview, and thank you so much. And I'm praying for you throughout this, and I cannot wait to see the reaction from the movie and how many people that it touches, because as a mom with 3 kids in college, it totally hit me in a million ways, and it was an incredible film, and I'm very proud to have been able to already see it and just get to know more about her, because like I said, I do have some connections to that day, and I like that you're telling the life, behind what happened. And I think that's a beautiful story, and I really I wish I would have known her. That's one of the things I kept thinking is, I wish my kids would have known her, I wish I was one of my kids' friends. I mean, just watching her, she seemed like an amazing young girl, and again, my heart still goes out to you because I know it's never over. And it's always something that will continue to be something you have to deal with. And I think you've done a beautiful job with that. And I pray God gives you the strength to handle anything that comes with, with coming through with the movie, and that it just touches tons and tons of lives, and that her life wasn't in vain. I already know it isn't, because I already know that people are being impacted. But, when this movie comes out, I pray it's just more than tenfold what you think it is going to be. And just
thank you, Ginger.
Very proud for everybody involved, and great directing, great producing. The whole thing was done very, very well. And I see a lot of Christian films, and I interview a lot of people, and the common theme gets to be a little bland and a little bit too vanilla, and then people feel like they can't relate to it, even adults. And I think even adults that have kids that are going through things, this will help them understand their children, and at least maybe bring up conversations. Sometimes that conversation just never starts, and this is a way to watch this movie with your kids and start conversations that should have already happened, or that you've been maybe even had a burden to ask questions with your kids. And this is a good way to get those conversations going between kids and their parents, so we can prevent kids from being troubled to take it to the level that Dylan and Eric did, that they find the right outlet for their pain and their suffering, and find that in Christ. So thank you so much. It was wonderful to meet you. My middle name's Beth, so I've been called Ginger Beth all my life. So it's like, Beth, great name.
Thank you.
Well, you have a very blessed day, and I'm excited for this release.
Thank you, Ginger. Appreciate your call.
Thank you so much, Beth.